Imagine it's 1982. You've done everything right. Long nights, early mornings, years of discipline and ambition, all leading to this moment. You've climbed the corporate ladder step by step, and now, standing at the peak of your personal success, you're ready to reward yourself. Not just with any car, but with a statement, the ultimate symbol of American achievement, a Cadillac. Smooth, elegant, powerful, a machine that doesn't just take you places, but tells the world you've arrived.
So you walk into the dealership and spend $17,000 on the brand new Cadillac Cimarron. The badge on the hood carries decades of prestige. You drive it off the lot with pride, feeling like you've joined an exclusive club. But then, just days later, something unsettling happens. You pull up at a stoplight next to your neighbor, driving an $8,000 Chevy Cavalier. At first, you barely notice, but then you start to look closer. The roofline? Identical. The doors? The same. The dashboard? Eerily familiar. And then it hits you. Not slowly, but all at once, like a punch to the gut. You didn't buy a luxury car. You bought a Chevrolet wearing a Cadillac badge, a disguise, a costume. And suddenly, that feeling of pride turns into something else entirely. Doubt, regret, maybe even betrayal. Because what you thought was a symbol of success was nothing more than an illusion. This is the story of how General Motors committed one of the greatest sins in automotive history when they stopped building icons and started selling identities for profit. For decades, General Motors didn't just sell cars, they engineered ambition. For nearly 50 years, they owned the American dream itself. Their strategy was brilliantly simple, the ladder of success. You didn't just buy a car, you graduated through them. You started with a humble Chevy, reliable and accessible. Then, as your income grew, you moved up to a Pontiac, sportier, more expressive. Oldsmobile followed, refined and mature. Buick added comfort and quiet prestige. And finally, Cadillac, the ultimate destination, the symbol that you had made it. Each brand had a clear identity, a clear purpose, and a clear place in your life journey. It wasn't just marketing, it was a perfectly engineered ecosystem of aspiration. But then, everything changed. The 1970s hit like a shockwave. The oil crisis sent gas prices soaring, tripling almost overnight. Suddenly, those massive V8 engines, once symbols of power and freedom, became expensive burdens. At the same time, a new threat quietly took over the market. Japanese manufacturers, Toyota, Honda, Datsun, were building smaller, lighter, and shockingly reliable cars. They were efficient, affordable, and increasingly impossible to ignore. And while GM was still thinking big, the world had gone small. Panic set in. The old formula no longer worked. The ladder of success was breaking. GM needed a response, fast. They needed a small luxury car to compete with rising European brands like BMW and Mercedes. And they didn't have years to develop it. They needed it yesterday. Instead of taking the time to engineer a true small Cadillac, something worthy of the badge, General Motors made a different choice. The engineers stepped back, and the accountants stepped in. Inside the boardroom, the conversation was no longer about identity, craftsmanship, or long-term brand value. It was about speed, cost, and margins. The solution they landed on seemed efficient, even clever. Take the existing J-body platform, a chassis originally designed for cheap, mass-market economy cars, and stretch it across multiple brands. One architecture, 5 different logos. On paper, it was a masterclass in cost saving. In reality, it was the beginning of a quiet disaster.
This was badge engineering in its most extreme form. They didn't re-engineer the heart of the car. The engine remained the same, the suspension unchanged, the driving experience identical. The only differences were surface level, softer seats, a touch of wood trim, a few cosmetic upgrades, and of course, the Cadillac crest placed proudly on the hood. GM believed the illusion would hold. They believed customers wouldn't look deeper, wouldn't compare, wouldn't question. They assumed the power of the brand was strong enough to override the reality of the product. But what they failed to understand was simple and devastating. People don't just buy a logo, they buy what it stands for. The reaction was immediate and merciless. The automotive press didn't hold back. One journalist famously described the Cimarron as a disappointment of historic proportions, and that wasn't an exaggeration, it was a warning. Review after review pointed out the same uncomfortable truth. This wasn't a real Cadillac. It didn't feel like one, it didn't drive like one, and most importantly, it didn't deserve to be one. But the real damage wasn't printed in magazines or measured in bad headlines. It was happening quietly, invisibly, in the minds of the customers. Because Cadillac, for the first time in its history, had broken an unspoken promise. They had taught their buyers something dangerous, that the badge on the front of the car no longer guaranteed anything. And that's where the deeper mistake reveals itself. What GM did wasn't just a product failure, it was a strategic miscalculation. They treated Cadillac not as a legacy to protect, but as a cash cow to exploit. Instead of investing in the brand's long-term identity, they extracted short-term profit from its reputation. But brands don't work like factories, they work like trust. And once that trust is broken, it doesn't come back easily. A 30-year-old buyer who felt deceived in 1982 didn't just switch cars for a year or two. They switched loyalty, permanently. They walked into a BMW showroom, then later a Lexus dealership. And from that moment on, Cadillac wasn't even in the conversation. Because in the automotive world, you can recover from a bad car, but recovering from a broken identity is almost impossible.
It took Cadillac nearly 40 years to recover from the damage caused by the Cimarron, and in many ways, the scars are still visible. Because what was lost wasn't just sales, it was belief. A brand that once defined American luxury had to spend decades rebuilding trust, redefining its identity, and proving again and again that it still deserved its place at the top. And when you zoom out, you realize this story isn't just about Cadillac, it's a pattern. Even today, across both the automotive and tech industries, companies fall into the same trap. They try to sell excitement instead of substance, perception instead of performance, hype instead of real value. But history is brutally consistent on one point. You might fool customers once, but you can never build a lasting future on a lie.
So now the question comes to you. When you look at today's market, cars, technology, brands,
Do you see it happening again? Is there a product out there that's all image, all marketing, but empty underneath? A high price tag attached to a badge rather than true substance? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most important lessons in automotive history, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, because sometimes understanding the past is the only way to see the future clearly. I'll see you in the next one.